This presentation on capacity development in GEOGLAM, strategies, activities, impacts, and lessons learned is part of the session on co-designing capacity development. My name's Andy Nelson. I'm a professor at ITC, University of Twente, and capacity development co-lead within GEOGLAM.
My name is Alyssa Whitcraft. I'm from the University of Maryland and the GEOGLAM Secretariat, and I am also the co-lead on capacity development for GEOGLAM. To refresh all of your memory quickly, GEOGLAM principally has a G20 mandate. It came out in 2011 as a part of their action plan on food price volatility in markets, but they've updated it over the recent years to include not just using Earth observations for markets, but also to include food security. And in the process, we're also trying to strengthen our linkages to both national and global policy frameworks, including those that are the GEO Big Three and their priorities moving forward. So GEOGLAM really at its heart is a best practices and standards collecting organization. And what I want to highlight there is it's about standards collecting and pulling together the best practices. It's not about mandating. So it's very much not top down, it's very much bottom up. And we do our best to kind of represent the best of what we have to do and kind of unifying a vision, but we really don't try to prescribe what our partners must do. That passes over also to the way we're approaching capacity development. We established our CapDev team in 2019. We had several years of capacity development kind of in each of the individual projects that comprise GEOGLAM, but it really took us up until kind of 2018, 2019 to realize what our role really was and to get organized and get members in a critical mass into this team. The members are active in both capacity development and stakeholder engagement, and we try and include people who are not just kind of acting on that, but also the people who have traditionally been recipients of that so that we can kind of get their perspectives and enriching our systems as well. We have a couple of key activities and priorities that we're focusing on in this early phase. We're really working on developing our strategic vision for capacity development for GEOGLAM, which I think is going to be a lot of what we discussed today. We're documenting and promoting good practices around capacity development, and we'll share some of the lessons that we've learned thus far that we're pulling together. But we're also kind of trying to promote a community research and operationalization agenda and working through the whole kind of research to operations cycle. And so we're focused not just on individual capacity development, but also kind of organizational change and the full life cycle of these sort of strategic relationships we develop. And then lastly, we serve as sort of a liaising body with the other CapDev for Earth observations organizations such as in CEOS and GEO and beyond, so that we can really represent what it is that the GEOGLAM community sees as our top priorities.
So within GEOGLAM, in the CapDev team, we have some guiding principles that really describe our way of working and describe the values in what we would try to promote within the community. And what we recognize throughout of this is that it's really a co-development process. It's something that's also long-term, and we really want to start all of our work with a clearly user-defined needs. And we recognize that this has to be clearly articulated by individuals and organizations. And it's really important that we identify some of the factors that drive the individual organizational behavior. And these kind of motives and incentives are really specific to a particular societal setting. And it's very important that these are incorporated into a theory of change for any capacity development intervention we do. We also recognize the need for an adaptable approach that responds to user needs. This can be an experimental approach, it can be incremental, and it's all part of the co-development and co-creation process that we have. And that really means long-term relationships. These things take time to be developed. It's not just about training, but there can be mentoring and coaching roles in that too. And finally, acknowledging that training is only one part of the program. Here we talk about conventional skills enhancement, that's fine, but also we want to look at broader systemic challenges of adopting Earth observations into workflows. And that requires a much more comprehensive capacity development program than you would get simply from training. Now, as we recognized all of these ways of working and practices, we determined that our community and the people we work with would benefit from a guidance document. And this is something that we're working on right now with our team. And it aims to collect all of the community knowledge that we have and all the practice that we've done ourselves and all the experiences and all the narratives and stories that we've found from working with partners and trying to put them into a comprehensive document that's really going to help us, but our partners, to take this best practice and use it in future implementations, and really describe how we do this kind of work in GeoGLAM. So it's a resource, and it's part of our ambitions to scale up agricultural monitoring activities and the associated capacity development activities that go with that. It's a mixture of theory, our definitions and our principles that we've just talked about, developing a theory of change, the approaches we have to co-design, and then examples of really good practice and stories from case studies across GeoGLAM. So we're going to start talking about some of those stories in the next few slides, and hopefully give you a flavor of how these have actually led to impact and why we think our way of working with capacity development is quite effective. Before we dig into those stories, these are just 4 text boxes here with some of the key messages that I think we'd like to talk about today. And I think Alyssa will jump in here a bit as we for these 4 keywords. And they'll come back throughout the slides. Trust is one, complementarity is another one. And Alyssa, maybe you've got a few words to say about the other 2 boxes here too.
Yeah, so of course the other 2 you can read plainly are stewardship. What do we do at the end of a project? A lot of geo activities are comprised of individually funded projects. How do we ensure that we can continue to benefit from them after their grant cycle or after their project lifetime has been completed? And stewardship is really the key word there. And then we're going to really show the ways in which the regional and global groups that comprise GEO and GeoGLAM have been critical to the success of capacity development interventions that we've had so far.
Yep, great. So the first example is going to take us over to Southeast Asia. And here, I think the key message here is the ability to convene and bring together end users into regional and global EO networks. And so this is an example of Asia Rice community and GeoRice, one of the projects associated with Asia Rice. And this is really driven by the need in South and Southeast Asia for a community of partners across multiple countries in the region to develop a monitoring system for rice production, by far and away the most important crop in the region. And what this community has done over the years is taken this transition from research to operation and scaled it up so that all of the partners in this network are able to rapidly uptake and own SAR-based rice monitoring technology. And the example is shown here, and you can see there are very many logos representing all the partners, but some of those working together on a system under the GeoRice project to identify, in this particular example, a decrease in winter-spring rice harvested as compared to the previous year. But the real story is here, it's kind of a regional story about how you develop a community of practice, bring them into a network, and make sure that the Earth observation technology that's available is embedded within the network and within the partners. Another example from the region of Southeast Asia is CropWatch. And this is an operational monitoring system that's been running for a number of years, but has now taken the next step of putting the system onto the cloud. And here, this allows a much greater involvement in kind of co-design, because that cloud-based system also includes functionality for APIs. So this means that in this case, an existing system in Thailand called AgriMap could have a very simple API call to the CropWatch monitoring system, so that all of the information in CropWatch, all of the data that's been processed and all the indicators could be seamlessly integrated into the Thai AgriMap system in a really transparent way. So the message here is about complementing existing systems or augmenting them, so it's immediately embedded in their operational monitoring system. So there's a very, very low bar to get over in terms of learning, and there's very little change, but you're simply strengthening an existing system and making sure that what you do is complementary and fitting the user needs. Another example here is the Sentu Agri system, which exploits Sentinel-2 data for local to national agricultural monitoring. And I think this is a great example of a project that followed many of the steps that we talk about in our theory and practice of very strong user engagement from the very beginning to develop the algorithms and the specifications that were needed, then going into a whole co-design process and co-development to produce a scalable solution that delivers these Sentinel-2 based products to a number of users, and demonstrating that it can be suitable for national to local scale monitoring. But then one of the challenges then is to ensure that these systems sent to Agri live beyond the project life. So getting those research activities operational and making sure that there's stewardship of all the knowledge that's been developed over time. And this is where the next step took place, where the Center Agri system has now been incorporated into the GeoKnowledge Hub. And it's kind of a proof of concept for the GeoKnowledge Hub. Because the idea is that the community anticipates that if we can curate a lot of the intellectual capital through the Knowledge Hub platform, it's a bit of a one-stop shop for institutions to look, who are looking to implement operational systems themselves. So it's broad deployment, it's transferability, and it's stewardship of the system and the associated training material that goes with it.
I'm going to talk about two stories. You may have seen this. It's popped up over the years in a couple of GeoGLAM impact story slides. In some, there was a severe drought in Argentina, and this was in 2018. The Ministry of Agriculture needed to declare a state of emergency to support farmers, but didn't know how to do so with great spatial precision and at this scale. INTA, which is the National Technology Research Center for Agriculture, utilized a variety of systems that they've developed over the years through participation in GeoGLAM, and moved physically offices into the Ministry of Agriculture to co-develop this system that really precisely responded to their need. You can go to the next slide. One of the systems that underpinned that was the GLAM system. This was developed maybe 15 years ago in partnership between NASA, USDA, and the University of Maryland. And it's been used operationally, including by INTA in the previous example. The system was a little out of date, and so we received funding from NASA to update the system, refined it based on the user feedback of the people who were actually using it. Thank you to CONAB in Brazil and INTA in Argentina in particular. And we completely redesigned the system to make it more accessible and easier to use. AMA is the regional network of GeoGLAM in the Americas, and we came together on a call to talk about COVID impacts, and decided to show this interface just as our tool in case it was useful to anybody on the call. The head of estimations for the Bolsa de Cereales, which is an independent estimating organization within Argentina, saw it, then came into contact with group members from the AMA team. They had an informal chat over WhatsApp, showed him how to use the tool, he tweeted it out, and next thing we know, one of the most important news outlets in Argentina, La Nación, published about how this NASA data basically kind of raised the alert about these drought conditions that are taking place yet again in northern Argentina. And so what this highlights is A, the value of the regional networks, B, the fact that we maintained a system in over many years and improved it. We were the stewards of this system, and we designed it intentionally to be low cost in terms of redeploying it and updating it in the future. And then we also really kind of, not every capacity development and kind of tech transfer activity has to be super formal. This was via telecon and via WhatsApp and via Twitter, and look at the result. Next slide, please. Similarly, I think probably a lot of you have seen this. This is the case in Uganda of them using satellite data to have kind of proactive response to food shortages. They were able to see kind of more synoptically and earlier in the season that crops weren't going to recover, and the government was able to kind of institute these relief programs for farmers. This quote here is from Martin Awar, who is the permanent secretary in the commissioner of the office of the prime minister in Uganda. He won the SDG award last year, right, from Geo. And this really shows how important it is to sort of have a champion in an organization with whom you have a trust relationship. Go to the next slide. Because ultimately what that enables is this relationship between Dr. Catherine Akalembe and Martin Awar in the Prime Minister's office when there was an unrelated emergency, severe landslides in a portion of the country. They weren't exactly sure how to respond to it, but they were able to sort of reap what they sowed in terms of the relationships that they had built and fostered in the region. And so when this landslide happened, they turned to Catherine, and Catherine was able to activate the Copernicus EMS system and leverage that big geo network that we have in order to kind of respond to this disaster and hopefully build a more resilient system in the future.
So I'd just like to finish off with these 4 messages, going back to the key words we mentioned at the beginning of the talk. Successful relationships, as part of the lessons that we've learned, are built on trust and ongoing communication based on this user-defined need. This is essential to the way we work. The interventions that are designed within GeoGLAM should complement and not replace or threaten existing services in an end-user organization.
And similarly, you know, if you've created a really impactful and useful project, it makes sense to see if you can transition it to a new system or a new set of users. But in order to do that, you have to maintain it. It has to work. It has to be resilient to changes in technology and needs. And then finally, demonstrating the need and the value of bringing the end users into the global and regional geogroups really kind of helps those systems and those organizations be resilient to institutional turnover, for one, and secondarily helps ensure that you know, people have access to the sort of cutting edge stuff that Geo is producing.
Great, thanks for your attention.